Okay, Mrs. Skelton, you shouldn't be able to feel anything. You can't feel that, can you? Good. Yes, all it should feel like is someone doing the washing up in your tummy. Yes. No, not much longer now, Mrs. Skelton. Don't worry. Not long. There it was! The blurry mass of flesh that was my child, hoisted above that blue medical blanket in that operating theatre. And I was the VIP I never really thought I would be.
That was the prologue.
So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Tom Skelton : VIP. No, this is not a show about my genetic predisposition to bowel problems and the possible story of me getting a private VIP colonoscopy. No, the VIP actually stands for Visually Impaired Papa. Yes, so, visually impaired. You might have guessed, but I should warn you that during this show, there will be quite a few jokes about the blind. But it is absolutely fine, because I myself am legally blind. And actually blind. So it's absolutely fine to laugh. I want you to laugh. I need you to laugh. And if any heckles, therefore, could be verbal rather than mimed, that would be much appreciated. I'm not entirely sure what a mimed heckle would look like, but presumably something along the lines of... This is, of course, the two-fingered go forth and multiply salute made famous at Agincourt. So I am genuinely blind. I am a VIP, a visually impaired person. I am partially sighted. People only ever quote some of me. I do like to make this clear at the start of every show, because once I was doing a show called Blind Man's Bluff, which was a story about my own sight loss diagnosis. And after the show, a young man came up to me and he says, "Oh, I really enjoyed the show, but are you actually blind?" And I said, "Yes. That was the point of the show." And he said, "Oh God, I'm really sorry. I feel really bad for laughing now." So what you're saying, young man, is that it's okay to laugh at the blind, but not with them. No, and not really. I'm a bit of a coward. I just said, "Oh, thank you very much for coming. Here's a flyer to some other shows I'm in." But I could understand his reaction. You see? Well, the thing is, I often do try to pass as a sighted person, I admit. And, you know, you can understand it because I don't have the usual accoutrements of the blind man. I don't have the cane, the dog, or the piano. And so, you know, and quite often it means that people say to me, "Oh, you know, Tom, I would never have guessed that you're blind. Tom, no one would be able to tell that you're visually impaired at all. Are you really partially sighted? No one would know, Tom." And I always say, well, you know that when you say that in a complimentary tone, it implies that if I did look blind, that would be a bad thing. No, as I say, I'm a coward. I just say, "Oh, thank you very much. Here's a flyer to some other disabilities it doesn't look like I have." But the real question people want to know is, what can you see? What can you see, Tom? And I find this question quite hard to answer. So I always defer to a character from that great show, Blind Man's Bluff. You should watch it, but you will need a time machine. So I'll bring back my ophthalmologist from that show.
Hello, my name is Dr. Riley. That's with two Y's, no I's. Thomas, thank you so much for coming. I'm afraid that it is indeed as we suspected. You have inherited and developed Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy, the genetic eye condition that runs in your family. It's begun in your left eye and has now spread to your right eye. Very soon you will have no central vision. You will have only peripheral vision, a grand total of around 5% vision. You will have no optic nerve, or at least none to write home about. You will not be able to focus anymore. You won't be able to read like you can at the moment. You will struggle with distance, detail, and even when you can see, which won't be more than 2 feet in front of you, things will be blurry. Everything will be a blur. Now, Thomas, if you look on the... sorry, if you think positively, Thomas, that you could say that now you've got Labours, that you've joined the Labour's Party. It's a bit like the Labour Party, except that it has a lot fewer members and is even less popular. But it does have a more benign attitude towards disability.
So there he was, Dr. Riley. Yeah. But this show is called VIP, not just VI, and the P doesn't stand for pontificating. So have we got any papas in the room? Yay! We're very tired, sort of. Is there a papa over here? Yes? Oh, yeah. How old is yours? One year old. Okay, so a lot of this might be quite triggeringly traumatic, so apologies. Okay, so have we got any VIPs, any visually impaired people in? Woo! Woo! Hello! Hello! Woo! And have we got any, can we mix them up? Have we got any visually impaired papas? Yay! So when I first got that sight loss diagnosis from Dr. Riley, there were so many things that I knew I wouldn't be able to do. I knew I would never be able to drive. I couldn't read properly anymore. I knew that lots of dreams and ambitions that I might have had were not going to be realised. Like I could no longer become a surgeon. Although that was probably more to do with my very poor GCSE results in sciences. But one of the things I thought, well, that's not going to happen. Well, that's going to be really hard, was being a dad. I mean, I was a young man in my early 20s, so I had the luxury of not having ever really thought about it. We men have the advantage of just waiting to see if it happens. Then if it doesn't happen by accident or design, we can still just decide that it might happen. But dads are practical. Dads need to see. You know, they're meant to look after kids. They're meant to see where they're going and if they're getting into danger. They're meant to change nappies nowadays. And they're meant to play football with their kids. Watch them in school sports day or school plays. How was I going to do any of that? So I just thought, I didn't think it would ever really happen. But spoiler! It did. And I'm going to tell you how. No, not in that. Well, unless you... yes! Okay, well, when writing this show, I knew that I wasn't going to have as much time as desired because of childcare commitments. So I knew I had to be really efficient. The first method was something that I call method writing, which is basically any time that I spend with or looking after or playing with my child, I counted as writing the show. I had this fantasy that I'd just be like, you know, watching him, playing with him, and then I'd just send myself funny little voice memos that I could use later. But I encountered my first hurdle of being a VIP, because when I'm looking after him on my own, I do tend to trundle round after him very, very close by to make sure he's not picking up any small batteries to swallow. So I had to be even more efficient. So I decided to come up with what I'm going to call a structure. So this structure is comprised of 8 chapters. Each of these chapters is comprised of a title. Each of these titles comprised of words. Each of these words comprised of some letters which go back into the words to form the meanings, which form the content of the titles, which then bring the content of the chapters, which form the basis of the structure. That's never got quite as much as when I first said it to myself in a mirror. But I'm keeping it in. So I'm going to tell you the story of how, when, why, and if is answered, I became a VIP. And to tell you this story, we have to go back to the beginning of the tale. We have to go back to the start. For any of the VIPs in the room, or those who just can't remember classic videos from 2003, I am doing the backwards walking made famous by Chris Martin in the Coldplay video, The Scientist. But unfortunately, when I was first devising this show, I thought I would have a bigger stage. So I'm just going to go back and forth, back and forth.
Chapter 1. Less than immaculate conception.
You asked for it. So, my wife and I got married in July 2022. And, we had spoken vaguely about whether we wanted kids. We both knew that vaguely we did in a sort of abstract fashion. But the fact of marriage meant that we had a more concrete discussion. Now, I won't reveal who was who to protect identities, but essentially, one of us was quite keen to start trying quite soon after the wedding, and another of us wanted to wait and see for kind of as long as possible. Again, I won't reveal who's who here. So the thing is, if I tell you that after many negotiations, we came up with a compromise position. We weren't going to start trying immediately, but we would stop preventing. Okay. That was the policy. One of us, I thought I'd got, sorry. One of us thought we got away with it a little bit here. But if I tell you that we got married in July 2022, and our child was born in April 2023. And, the stop preventing worked in... Well, look, I want to say that I know that's incredibly lucky, and so many couples would do anything to have that sort of luck. And obviously we were incredibly lucky. But it just felt too soon for me. It felt too scary. I just didn't feel ready. But I'm getting ahead of ourselves. So, you remember the Beckhams when they had their first child? Famously, they named their son after the place where he was conceived. You remember? The Brooklyn Beckham, yeah? Well, because we live in this internet age, I want to protect my child's identity for privacy and data security reasons. So, for the purposes of this show, I will refer to him as Inverness. So how do I know that his name is Inverness? Well, it's simple. There is, again, I won't reveal who for data protection reasons, but I know it wasn't the wedding night because there is photographic evidence of one of us passed out in our full wedding garb with a timestamp of 20 to midnight. So it wasn't then. But maybe it was the second night of our married bliss. We were going to the most romantic place in all of these islands, the Highlands. And we were going to get there in the most romantic form of transport, the Caledonian Sleeper. Lovely. So we arrived at London Euston, feeling excited, newlyweds, and we showed the guard our tickets and asked where our cabin was.
Okay, you're in coach C, seats 41 and 42.
Sorry, seats? Is that... Which cabin is...
No, you're in coach C, seats 41 and 42.
Seats? So the thing is, we'd had to plan our honeymoon at the same time as planning our wedding, so we didn't have quite as much time as we ideally would have done. And one of us, again, I won't reveal who to protect identities, one of us had to book the Caledonian Sleeper tickets in a little bit of a rush on the Trainline app. But to be fair to her, it doesn't... sorry. To be fair, the Trainline app doesn't actually make it clear which you're selecting, whether you're selecting seats or a cabin. It doesn't even give you the option. And we thought, for £270 with a disabled person's railcard discount, it's got to be a cabin, hasn't it? It's got to be a cabin. We booked in April, this was for July. Anyway, so we just thought, as we settled into our seats, we've got to make the best of it, okay? So we said, we're going to go straight to the buffet car, straight to the food car.
No, I'm sorry that access to the buffet car is restricted to cabin guests only.
What? This is verbatim true. Be warned. So we thought, okay, fine. We'll just order to our seats. Have a slap-up meal, haggis, neeps, tatties, the works, right here in our seats.
I'm afraid you can't actually place an order until 10:30, when the buffet car is closed and we know what food is left after the cabin guests have eaten.
Really? It's true, isn't it? It's so true. So we've got to make the best of it. We've got to make the best of it. So we obviously did what any newlywed couple would do and just ordered lots and lots of booze to our seats. Wine and beer started to flow. It was lovely. And, you know, I suddenly started to think, as I gulped down the rest of my first can, maybe we could consummate the marriage here. Maybe we could join the 50-centimetre high club. But then I realised that it would be really difficult to name our child.
Peterborough, Stevenage, Newark Northgate, York.
Or maybe it was the West Coast main line.
Milton Keynes Central, Coventry, Birmingham New Street, Birmingham International.
No, only joking, I would never be able to last that long. So, that is how I know he's called Inverness. That's how I know, but do you want to know how it... No, I'll leave it there.
Chapter 2, The Fear. The Fear.
So, depending on which one of us you talk to, again, I won't reveal to protect identities, but our honeymoon either lasted for 5 whole glorious weeks, or it ended after 3 days, when the location switched from Inverness to the Edinburgh Fringe. Who you talk to. But the stop preventing policy had been in place for a few weeks, and I have to say, it wasn't quite working out as one of us might have hoped. You see, there were signs, symptoms, likelihoods of pregnancy. Again, I know how lucky this is to be happening so soon, but, well, it just seemed too soon. And one evening, I was just feeling really anxious. It was partly because my wife was doing a pregnancy test in the bathroom, in the flat we were staying in. And also partly because I was already extremely late to go and be in a show. Adventures of the Improvised Sherlock Holmes. Come and see it today at 4:30. It's genuinely true. So, she came back in, and it was positive. And again, I won't reveal who was who for identity protection reasons, but one of us was really excited. Obviously terrified, but just really excited. And one of us was just doing the best acting performance of their life. But subsequently it seemed clear that the rictus grin and the wasn't that convincing. And as I walked to go and be in that show, I felt this fear bubbling up inside me, starting to seize my whole body. It was too soon. You know, I had things I wanted to do, places I wanted to go, things I wanted to be. I mean, maybe I could do all sorts with my life. Maybe I wanted to sell out an entire run at the Edinburgh Fringe in a massive venue. No offence. Maybe I could stand for Parliament. Maybe I could start up a startup and be one of the good tech bro. But instead, this collection of cells, this thing that we've created somehow is going to come and steal all of these dreams, all of these years from me. And as I stood there, solving another intricate mystery, deducing as Sherlock Holmes, I thought, the famously childless Sherlock Holmes and childless Dr. Watson, we would never have heard of them if they were having to spend all day changing nappies in Baker Street. And I thought to myself, maybe this is the moment that I will forever think, you could have been a legend, but you became a father.
You could have been a legend, but you became a father.
And through the winter months, the fear grew and grew. They split into 3 main categories. There was the practical. How was I, as a VIP, going to look after this baby? You know, nappies, making sure that they don't get lost in the park. All of these things. Making sure they're breathing. But then there was the emotional. You need that sort of parental love. That love to be able to do any of these really difficult, trying, practical things. And yet all I could feel at the moment was fear. Fear and a feeling that it was too soon. And then I was worried as well about our relationship. We were newlyweds. We were meant to be excitedly enjoying our young lives. But instead, this thing was going to rear its head and come between us, demanding food at all night and time of the day. And then I was worried about my friends. I thought that I would lose all of my friends who didn't have kids. And those who did have kids, we would lose everything but that shared fact. And then my third fear, in a way, was the biggest. I was terrified that my entire sense of self would be subsumed by this spawn. You know, I had friends who nowadays would say to me, you know what, I cannot imagine life without little Peterborough. You know what, it's just like Milton Keynes Central has always been there. You know what, I don't like to do anything that Birmingham New Street doesn't like to do. I only like to do things with Birmingham New Street now. I thought, I don't want to have that life. I don't want to have my identity ruled and defined by this thing, this baby, whatever it will be. And I remember asking one of my very wise friends, who was a dad, about this. You know, is it true? Should I be worried about my sense of self being subsumed? And I remember so clearly what he said.
Well, you can't do anything about that, Tom.
And I watched him as his blurry form leant and fed his little boy Toronto Central another maple syrup snack. So the fear grew, multiplying. And then to try and combat this, we'd signed up to NCT classes, so National Childbirth Trust. Did you go to NCT? No. Yes. Is it yes or no? No. Okay, no. Has anyone been to NCT? Yeah. Yes. Did you find it useful? Yeah, you see, so often, you save some money there. So we were there, and it's meant to be like this practical class, series of classes about looking after babies. But the clue is slightly in the name, National Childbirth Trust. It did seem to be a lot about the birth, which I already felt completely useless to help with. Poor GCSE results in the sciences. And because I was scared, I admit that I hadn't contacted the course leader to let them know about the eyesight. I hadn't been very enthusiastic, so I hadn't told them about my accessibility needs. Whether they could have put something in place or not is a live issue. But before the first session, we were sitting there and we were talking to the couple next to us. And the guy in the couple, he just seemed nervous, and he was expressing it. He said, it all feels a bit soon, it's a bit sudden, I'm just not sure. And it did feel amazing to hear someone else express these reservations, someone in the same position as me. And I felt a little bit of that fear chipped away by that little conversation. And when it came to formally introducing ourselves at the start, I thought, I'd better say something now, because otherwise it's just a bit odd. So I said, hi, I'm Tom, I'm partially sighted, so that's why I might not be able to look at things very clearly, and I might have to go close to things, and I might not recognise you, etc., etc. But the first session, of course, they didn't know that, so it was very, very inaccessible. What the first exercise is that the leader had put images and pictures of different stages of childbirth and the birth process on tables around the room. Okay? And so basically we had to go round and like discuss it, or free-form discussions. So I'm sort of like going round, going like, oh yeah, I couldn't see a bloody thing. Oh yes, very interesting, very interesting. And I didn't feel comfortable enough to go really close so that I could maybe see. And I'm sort of standing there pretending to see whatever it was I was pretending to see. No idea. When I realised the guy who I'd spoken to at the start had come up next to me, and he just went, "Phew, wish I was partially sighted." And with that doubly inappropriate little joke, I did have to admit, feel another little bit of the fear chip away. And at half time, this guy said, "Hey Tom, do you want to go and get a beer?" And I was like, "From where?" But there was a bar downstairs. I hadn't seen it, obviously. So we went downstairs and we got a beer, and you could feel the jealousy coming off the 7 other dads and the mums, to be fair. But don't worry, none of them indulged, as far as I could see. And during that second half, I did just feel a little bit more accepting of what was to come. That I just had to get on with it now. I just felt a bit more relaxed and a bit more accepting of my fate. This could have been, because of sharing the anxiety, but it could have also been the physical effects of the alcohol. But either way, I was ready to face it.
Chapter 3, The Miracle of Birth.
So, as you'll remember from that first scene, there we were in the operating theatre. So, just so you know, for the purposes of this scene, my wife is being played by my son. So, there we were. So my wife was having a cesarean because the baby was breech, so it was a lot safer. And also, she's half Italian, so it's traditional. And so, basically, we've reversed the perspective from that opening prologue scene. So, she's here, and then there's this medical blanket that they hold up so that you can't see over and what they're doing. There's like 9 or 10 doctors or midwives, obstetricians, anaesthetists in the room. So it's all very intimidating. And they keep saying to her before they start, like, "It's just going to feel like someone doing the washing up in your tummy." And she's like, "I don't know what that feels like." Neither do I. It's just weird, isn't it? She's feeling a bit odd because the epidural has started to take effect and she can't feel anything from the neck down. And the anaesthetist says to me, could you sit in the stool provided? Because we have had dads who've accidentally seen over the medical blanket. And then we actually had one dad who fainted and hit his head on the bed and had to go to A&E. Luckily quite close by. So I started to say, "Oh, you know what, you shouldn't worry because I'm actually partially..." And then I realised they don't need to fucking know. They're about to do major surgery on my wife, and I'm sat there going, "Oh, excuse me, I thought this birth was meant to be accessible." So I decided to just shut up and let them get on with it. And so I'm holding her hand, and she's feeling odd because of the way the epidural is working. And then, after about 10 or 15 minutes or something, switch perspective. Suddenly, hoisted above the medical blanket, this blurry mass of flesh. I mean, to be honest, I couldn't necessarily tell it was a baby. I was sort of just going on the context. And the anaesthetist is saying, "Look, look!" And I think this is meant to be the moment because, well, me and my wife had decided not to find out before if it was a boy or a girl. So this is meant to be the moment of revelation. She's like, "Look, congratulations, look!" And, I couldn't even tell it was a baby necessarily. So I obviously couldn't tell the sex. But my wife did say to me later on that she was surprised because she thought even I might be able to see his absolutely massive balls. Just to say, all baby boys are born with massive balls. It's not me boasting about the size of my son's balls in particular. You're a boy or a girl?
One of each, actually.
Okay, do you remember your boy's balls being huge?
Yes.
Yeah.
Look at my wife, she says yes.
Yes, exactly. See, it wasn't just you.
Inherited, though.
Anyway, so then they asked me if I wanted to cut the cord, and I was like, no. Do you want to do an Edinburgh Fringe show in a tiny sweaty room? So the baby had been taken over to the side, and then I heard the midwife say, Dad, come over here, Dad. And I was like, I think she's talking to me. I suppose it is possible that one of the surgeons is her father. I better go over. So I go over, and there she says, look, Dad, look. And there's this like wriggling mass of flesh, and all I can really think of at the moment is the film Alien. And she's like, look, Dad, look. And I didn't know what she's looking, what I meant to look at, but I'm like, oh yes, very interesting. Very interesting. It turned out to be the weight and the length that she was measuring, but even if I could see, I wouldn't have actually known what they meant. Again, very poor results in GCSE science. So obviously he was handed to my wife, and it was a bit of a nice moment there. But I didn't actually get to hold him until we were in our little sort of room, a little sort of cubicle with the curtain drawn. And then it was just me and him. My wife was elsewhere in another part of the hospital because she'd lost quite a lot more blood than they'd hoped. But this isn't about her. And when he was passed to me, I just felt this feeling. It just felt right to hold him close. And I know that's incredibly lucky. Like, I know that most parents don't feel that sort of instant feeling. Parents feel so many different emotions. Some parents feel nothing. Some feel repelled. Some feel a mix that they can't describe. But I, for whatever reason, had the luck to feel that feeling, that closeness, that love. And during the pregnancy, one of our friends who had 2 kids, she and her partner were telling us that in their experience, if one partner's really excited about the baby before the birth and the other's really scared, quite often after the birth, in their experience, it switches so that the other partner's scared and the other is excited. And that's sort of what happened with us. It just felt right being close to him. And we hadn't decided on a name, but I knew that my wife loved the name Inverness. So I just started calling him it. Hello, Inverness. It's you. And then the midwife came in and asked me if I wanted to dress him, and I was like, no, please, can you do it?
Chapter 4. It's only been 3 weeks.
So those first few weeks went by in a blur. Even more of a blur than it normally is for me. It was a hard first few weeks, Throughout the night, Inverness would be crying and feeding and crying and feeding and sleeping, crying and crying and feeding and feeding and feeding and crying and feeding and sleeping and crying and feeding. So it was particularly tough for my wife. So at 5 a.m. or so every morning, I would then take him up away so that she could get a little bit of sleep. Because for some reason at dawn was the longest time that he could go without a feed. I suppose those were the hours in which we bonded the most. It felt so strange, so surreal to be staggering around a living room at 5:30 a.m., you know, hallucinating almost, sleep deprived, not knowing where we were almost. I mean, I had done that quite a few times in my life. But normally I'd been doing something else during the night. And, you know, I just remember listening to lots of stuff with him, lots of music, Farming Today, which is apparently on at that time. And I got obsessed with this one album, God's Favourite Customer by Father John Misty. And in those mornings, I felt like every single lyric was about new dadhood and looking after a little baby.
It's only been 3 weeks.
It has only been 3 weeks, Inverness. But recently, when writing this show, I was listening back to that album, and I do think that maybe in my sleep-deprived, hallucinatory state, I had the blinkers on a bit about how much the lyrics were about that.
It's only been 3 weeks. A bag of speed.
It might have helped. But the important thing was that I felt like that first hurdle, that most difficult hurdle, whether I would want to look after this baby, had been overleapt. But you can have all the love in the world, but can you actually do the things to keep it alive? Let's find out.
Chapter 5. Nappying, feeding, losing, reading. I'm in over my head.
I'm in over my head.
So, of course, the first thing that we think of when we think of babies is nappies, right? Nappies. Did you know how to change a nappy before you... No, exactly. I mean, they don't tell you these things. They don't even tell you in NCT. I mean, they might have covered that, but I might have been too drunk. But the thing is, even though, you know, they don't tell you which way round it's meant to go and the instructions are all inaccessible, I had learnt that I needed to say if I was partially sighted. I needed to explain. And finally, one of these health visitors just showed me, tactilely, just talked me through it. And it was a lot easier than I thought.
Yay.
But of course, thank you. Thank you. That's the first of a 2,500. But of course, I soon learnt it wasn't putting the nappy on, but what happens in the nappy while it's on. Of course, you'll know this very well, but the thing about babies is that while they're just on milk, they don't have ordinary human poo. They produce this very strange, syrupy, sort of korma buttermilk-like substance. And I have to tell you, one of the first difficulties for me to make it so inaccessible was that the contrast was really not very good with my son's skin tone. But even then, the consistency, it was so hard to get off. I had to learn techniques and put mitigation measures in place. So I have to confess that I learned to use around 112 wet wipes every single time. I'm sorry, but I had to protect my son from, cholera. But if we don't reach our net zero targets, then it is my fault. Of course, though, that was not the worst of it. In fact, it got worse after he started on solid food and started producing real human poo. There was the silver lining that the contrast was much better with his skin. But at this point, he was wriggling. He was wriggling. And, well, I don't know if you guys remember the COVID-19 pandemic. But but remember, Chris Whitty, during that, would always talk about the chain of transmission. And this is what I became obsessed with during these nappy changes. The chain of transmission, because the problem is when he started wriggling, sometimes if I took my eye off the ball, then he might get his hand in it. And then he might touch his foot with his hand. So because I couldn't see exactly where the poo was, I had to follow the chain of transmission. And then he put his foot on the carpet as he leans over, and then I try and get that, but I put my knee in the carpet, and then I suddenly panic thinking I have to get this off my knee. I walk through the door, get some on the hinge accidentally, and then while I'm away he gets up, touches the hinge, and then goes to find his favourite book. I had to follow the chain of transmission, but often it was too hard to follow. I needed help from someone who could really follow the logical order of events. Yes, you see, my dear Watson, the case is evident. The fecal matter originated in the arsehole, and then the baby's hand touched the arsehole, went under the foot went under the carpet, then the father's knee touched the carpet, then the father in a panic fled and brushed the door hinge, then the baby got up, touched the door hinge himself, and then he touched the book, and that is the case of the crap upon the highway rat. Elementary, my dear Watson. Elementary. So, the thing is, despite these stressful times, I did learn techniques. I did learn techniques to cope with it. My personal favourite one, in the end, was to stop him wriggling, to make sure he was calm. I would just give him a bottle of milk to drink while I did his pooey nappy. Now, subsequently, the health visitor has told us that is really not recommended. But it's too late now. So this is not health advice. But, it worked for me. And, it meant that I could do his pooey nappies, whenever I saw him in the morning. The only thing that I do wonder about, though, is if later in life, if he's there, and he's about to start wiping after the deed, and then suddenly goes, why do I want some milk? But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But of course, the nappies weren't the real problem. The real danger was what causes the nappies. Feeding, you see. So we went to a workshop before putting him on solid food. And the workshop leader, I think she thought she was being really reassuring. And probably for most people, she was. Because she said, the thing is about choking. That's what parents always worry about, choking. Actually, if your baby is making sort of gagging sounds, like then actually that's nothing to worry about. That's not choking. That just means the baby is learning what fits down their throat. It's nothing to worry about. What you do need to worry about in terms of choking is if the baby goes silent. Talk about inaccessible! So then, of course, as you can imagine, because people often are quite silent when they're eating, if it's just me and him doing dinner time, then it'll be, Inverness! Inverness, are you okay? Are you okay? No, not on my watch! Not on my watch! So it's just a constant panic. But the problem is that he has begun to like this game as he sees it. So sometimes if it's just me and him, he'll just suddenly go silent. Like go really close to his face, and I'm not sure if that's a sort of enigmatic smile or the beginning of someone dying. Not on my watch! So I've had to put mitigation measures in place. Firstly, I try not to be the one feeding him. Just want to wait until he's 5. Or I just mash everything up. You can mash beans. You can even mash baked beans. Turn it into a nice soup. Yeah. But, the thing is, he's still, nothing's happened yet. He hasn't choked yet. But of course, actually as a VIP, the thing I'm obviously most fearful of is losing him. Since he could start walking, losing him in a public place. Always the scary thing. Of course, I realised soon enough that the thing is, when he first started walking, he was walking very, very slowly, so I could keep up with him. And I learnt techniques. I learnt to hold the back of his t-shirt, or hold his hand, or just reason with him. He was becoming a bit more pliant. And I felt really confident. I felt like I could go out with him and look after him and make sure he wasn't getting lost. But confidence can occasionally breed complacence. And one day we were in the park, lovely family day out, and he's running around, And I'm sort of running after him, but I'm feeling quite relaxed. And he goes behind this sort of climbing frame. And he's out of sight for a few seconds. I'm like, oh, this is so lovely. I'm a good dad, aren't I? And I bound around. And I'm thinking, I better get him now. And he just stood there. And I scoop him up in happy joy. And normally when I do that, he makes this little sort of gurgling laughter of a sound, like. But instead, I heard two sounds. I heard one from my right going, and then over there, I heard my wife's voice saying, "Inverness, don't go backwards up that slide." But if he's over, then who? And then I realised there was this woman coming towards me. "What are you doing with my daughter?" "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was my son." "Your son? What are you talking about?" I'm so sorry. Look, it's just they're wearing green. She's not wearing green. It's red." Oh gosh! And because of my panic and my fear, I wasn't explaining that I'm partially sighted and that I have colour blindness for red and green as part of it. And said she seems to get her phone out, so she's threatening to call the police. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And then finally my wife comes over and intervenes and explains. And oh God, it was close. It was a close one. If I'd been on my own, not only would I have picked up someone else's child, but I also would have lost my son with no idea where he was. So I learnt new techniques to deal with such situations. I would always make sure that I dressed him myself in very loud, uncolour coordinated clothes that didn't involve red or green. But it hadn't been too bad losing him then. So the dangerous stuff, maybe they weren't the things to fear. Actually, maybe it was something else. And I remembered something that someone had said, one of my friends, during the pregnancy.
Well, Tom, one of the most lovely things is when you can start reading to them. Huh? Oh, sorry, Tom. Sorry, Tom.
I was scared of that. I couldn't read to him. But I soon realised the amazing thing when he first showed interest in books. He's completely illiterate. He has no idea what it says in these books. So I had the glorious advantage of just being able to make up whatever I wanted based on the pictures that I could vaguely see. And my personal favourite was a story that I made up, and because it was so good, I kept going back to it again and again whenever I would read him this book. So this one is called It's Mine. I can't really read that, who it's by, but it doesn't matter. It's by me. And so I would just make up the story based on the pictures. The text was far too small. It's Mine ended up being a sort of a communist allegory. Okay? Basically, all the animals come and lay claim to this waterfront. So first we've got this very capitalist tiger. "Oh, it's mine, I claim the water." And then you've got the elephant, who has a sort of ancestral claim that they've never forgotten. And you've got a giraffe, who can see more of the water for further, and that's their claim. Then you've got a crocodile, who's an actual inhabitant, so quite a good claim there. And then you've got a koala, I think, who, I don't know what they're doing in the same jungle, but doesn't make a claim to go to hospital with chlamydia. Then there's a snake, and then there's a monkey, who I always thought was a cat, Rowan Atkinson, and then, of course, the king of the jungle, the only 3D character in the whole story. "It's mine," says the lion, as he smokes his big fat cigar and strokes his moustache. "The water is mine, but I shall divide it equally amongst all of the animals, from each according to his ability to swim, to each according to his thirst. Rawr." But then, as the animals frolic and enjoy the water, while their back is turned, the lion eats them all! Slash, in this picture, the animals are too small for me to see them. Never trust a Stalinist, Inverness. Never trust a Stalinist. And it was glorious. We read all sorts of wonderful books, and after a while, Inverness started to look at the books like I did. Putting his face up that close in order to see what only Daddy could see. Looking deeper into the stories. All these other losers are reading it like this. Until one day we were reading Zog. You might be familiar with Zog. And I was doing a great interpretation where basically Zog captures St. George as revenge for all the dragons and takes him off to a castle in Wales. It's wonderful. And then he goes, no. Okay, you don't like that interpretation? Okay, let's try this. Okay. So Zog was born in Catalonia and loved rugby league. No. Okay. Mummy. And he took Zog and waddled off to find Mummy and made her read it. He'd realised I wasn't reading the real words. He'd realised. It was devastating. Of course, it was encouraging developmentally. But that wasn't the point. This bond we'd had, it was broken. You know, the only books he would now allow me to read to him were books that were so short that I'd managed to memorise them. Or, well, I have to confess, what I did when I realised what was going on, I knew that no one had ever read him this book. And so, to avoid anyone reading him the real story, I hid it. So that as far as he knew, the real story was the one I would tell him. So, it's mine. Is ours. Inverness. It's ours.
Chapter 6. The Betrayal / Oedipus Rex, the special relationship.
So of course, we were having a lovely time, you know. We would play in the mornings, you know, we'd be like, I'd be one of those dads, I'd be like taking selfies of us together and then just like filming endless videos of him doing basically nothing. That I would send to our family, you know, again and again. And we were just having this real bond, you know. But after a while, it was down to a new phase. We decided, because we didn't want him in our bed anymore. Don't worry, we weren't so obsessed with our child that we were now sleeping in a cot ourselves. We decided to put him in his own cot. We decided to do sleep training. So, did you do sleep training or anything? No? Did you do sleep training? No, you see, it is I don't know if I would recommend it. It's very, very hard. See, according to my wife, it had to be the man doing it because apparently they can smell the milk on the mum, and so they would refuse to be put to bed. So it was down to me to do the sleep training. And we tried, the first technique we tried was something that we'd read about called total extinction. Yeah, pretty horrible, and it was. Basically, you'd put him in the cot, turn the light off, and shut the door, and just leave him to get himself to sleep. So you listen to him crying for 2.5 hours. Yeah, we gave up after 2 nights. But I still was determined that he would get himself to sleep. And I would just say to him, I'm just going to let you be. Then let you be. Time for leapies. And stroke him. I just let him get himself to sleep. And it was a real struggle, but in the end, he did it. It took weeks, nearly months. But my wife then, as a reward, let me always be the one to go and greet him in the morning. Because we'd had such a wrestling match over sleep the night before. Like, oh, Inverness, good morning. How did you sleep? And we had a real routine going. Bath time, story time, bedtime, and then the morning playtime. And after the routine was basically settled, I was listening to this book, and in one of the passages, it was talking about the Electra complex, which is apparently where all little girls go through this period of rejecting their mums and only wanting to spend time with their dads. And apparently, there's also the Oedipus complex, where all little boys only want to spend time with their mums and reject their dads. I thought, sounds like a load of bollocks to me. And one night, I was putting him to bed, And he went, no, no, Mummy, Mummy, Mummy. I was like, Inverness, come on, it's Daddy. Daddy putting you to bed. Mummy, Mummy, And after 10 minutes or so of this struggle, I ended up giving up and getting his mum. I just thought, maybe he just hasn't seen her enough today. Maybe he's missing her. But then in the morning, Inverness. No, Mummy! Mummy! It's like, but it's me, Inverness. I'm the only one who ever let you be. How could you do this to me?
Don't forget I'm the only fan of yours who has the sense to ever leave you be. How could you do this to me?
I thought maybe he'd worked out that I wasn't a normal dad. I couldn't see what he was holding up when he picked up one of his toys. I had to go and investigate really close. I couldn't make eye contact with him across the room. I couldn't do the normal things a dad should be able to do. And the first sign was not being able to read the real words. And this betrayal, this rejection, this Oedipal moment went on for months. Well, my wife later told me it was actually weeks. A week and a half. 8 days. But they were such a long 8 days. But finally, one morning I went into his room again with trepidation. He was like, morning, Inverness. And he just went, Dada. And I was like, you fucking gaslighter! No, not really though. As I say, I'm a complete coward. I just said, oh, thank you, here's a flyer to some other people who've rejected me. List of ex-girlfriends. Even though it was devastating for the 8 days, in the end I learned to accept it. He's fickle, he doesn't really know what he's doing, and after all, switching sides so easily. But he's a quarter Italian, it is traditional.
Chapter 7. My biggest fear realized.
So, we were back to normal times. It was lovely. And we went on holiday not too long after, and we had a great time. And after the holiday, we got back to our home station. And he had become obsessed with his mum's wheelie suitcase during this holiday. And he really wanted to pull it for that last leg of the journey. So we allowed him. And the 10-minute walk from the station took, between 30 and 35 minutes. But, we were just getting on well. I normally hate these wheelie suitcases, by the way, because they make all train stations and streets, especially in Edinburgh, really inaccessible. Everyone is now as long as they are tall. Anyway, but he loved it, so I didn't mind. And when we finally got to the front door, I said to my wife, oh, why don't you go up? I'll deal with this, and take my phone because it's out of battery. And he was struggling to get the case up, and I was like, Inverness, do you want me to do it? You stay there, and I'll do it. And I took the case, and I turned my back, just for a moment. And that was my mistake. When I turned round, he wasn't there. I felt a little bit worried, but of course, I can only see 2 feet in front of me, so I wasn't really scared. I just thought he might have gone down a bit further onto the street. So, Inverness, where are you? Where are you? And he wasn't there. He wasn't the other side of the gate. I started to panic a little bit now. Inverness! And I can't hear him and I can't see him. Oh, where could he have gone? Okay, we normally go down that street and we've just come from there, so I started walking as rapidly as possible. Inverness! Both trying to listen out and also trying to look for him. Inverness! I see a little shape, a little dark shape. Inverness! I go straight up to it, but of course, kicked someone's fucking recycling box that they've left in the middle of the pavement. Why? So then I'm starting to run. I think, oh, maybe that's him. No, it's just someone's e-bike, again, right in the middle of the path. think maybe, okay, he can't be here. Inverness! Inverness! But I have to make a decision. Surely he'll be down the street here, but there's a main road parallel to ours, and I just don't know what to do. Should I keep going down here? And then I hear a voice, Mate! Mate, is this your kid? I'm like, yes! Yes! And then I realise I have no idea who he's pointing at. I was like, probably! Hopefully! I start running, and I get to this bloke, and he's like, he's down there! And he's down there. I was like, why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you stop him? I was like, no, not really, I'm a coward. I said, thank you, here's a flyer to some other kids I've lost. And I'm running down here, and I'm running down towards the main road that's parallel. And I think, there he is, meow! No, okay. And then there's this other bloke who says, mate, is this your kid? I'm like, hopefully, probably, please. And then he's like, there. And I'm like, please. I just wanted an accessible losing my child experience. And he's on the ground. What happened? What happened to him? He's like, oh, I don't know, mate. I don't know. He was just running along, and there was no one around him, and he just threw himself to the ground in a sort of dive. I was like, oh, it's okay. He's a quarter Italian, so it's tradition. And I scooped him up. And I was like, Inverness, don't do that to me. Don't do that to me. Oh, it was terrifying. And we went back home and explained what had happened with tears running down my face to my wife, who immediately went online and ordered reins. We don't use them all the time, but just if there's ever any possibility where I can't keep him within arm's reach, I'll strap him in. Yeah. I have to tell you, just like that line in Fight Club, that night, that bedtime was the best goddamn bedtime we ever had.
Chapter 8, In Subsumption.
So yeah, bedtime that night was such a relief. My biggest fear had been realised. I had lost him. I genuinely lost him. And it had been as bad as I'd feared. But and then I was such a panic that I did the sleep sack the wrong way round. But we'll have so many other fears throughout his life. There'll be so many things that we have to deal with. Like, I love looking at his face at the moment. But I do have to put my face that close to his. And at the moment, he just thinks it's a funny little game that Daddy does. But will he be okay with it when he's 7, 11, 14? It's just going to be weird, isn't it? Will I get to see his face as he grows? And there'll be so many life events that I might not be able to see properly. Like, if he has a wedding day, and he's there at the altar, and they say, you may kiss the bride, or you may kiss the groom. Am I going to be up there like that going, go on, Inverness! I just wanted your wedding to be accessible! And the old father-son sports. I do feel whenever we're walking in the park, I get this ping-pong pang of sadness whenever I pass a table tennis table. That I won't be able to have a little casual game with him, even for a sport that was probably far down my list of preferences. And football. You're meant to play football with your son, aren't you, as a dad? And we do at the moment, and I am still much better than him. But that's not going to last for that much longer. And when I watch him play, I'm not going to be able to see that moment when he wins a penalty in the 90th minute with a blatant dive. I won't be able to properly watch him do all sorts of things. But we'll muddle through. We'll find little techniques and things to cope. And the thing about this Edinburgh run, normally I'm scared about whether people will come, whether the show's any good. But this year I was just scared about not doing bedtime. So I can't do it for these couple of weeks. And that's why my run is so short. So if you don't mind, I'm going to do bedtime story for you now. Well, for me. It's one I've memorised. When baby octopus wakes up, it's night time, her favourite time to be awake. When baby octopus goes for a walk, she pulls herself along the ocean floor. When baby octopus explores, she squeezes her body through a tiny gap in the coral. And when baby octopus is sleepy, she asks the elected leader, King Poseidon, if we should raise the taxes on the wealthier animals so that the lobsters and the king crabs could pay a larger share on their unearned wealth. This money could be reinvested into the public services for the little langoustines and prawns and algae, and then a more equitable sea life could be led and enjoyed by everyone. Good night, baby octopus, and good night, baby Inverness. Thank you very much. You have been a wonderful audience. That was my final show as I've got to go and do childcare. So if you did like the show, please do write a review. That would be lovely. Please do follow me on social media. And on the way out, I'll be handing out some flyers to some other shows I'm in.